The Arizona Cardinals season is about to begin, so in today's video, I want to give you guys 3 different reasons why I personally believe the Arizona Cardinals are one of the most underrated teams in the NFL. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Why is this dude with the Dallas Cowboys hat talking about the Arizona Cardinals? Well, unfortunately, I don't got a Cardinals hat, so if there's an Arizona fan out there, come hit me up. But as I said, we're going to be talking about the Arizona Cardinals. I'll be giving you guys 3 different reasons why I think they're underrated. And real quick, before we hop into the video, around 90% of you guys who watch my content are not subscribed, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Let's get into the video. Alright, so we are going to begin with reason number 1. I believe there is a lot of potential for this offense to grow. When you look at the entirety of this offense, there is a very good mixture of older talent and younger talent. You have some older talent guys like a James Conner, obviously Kyler Murray, a couple pieces on the offensive line, and then they're paired up nicely next to some younger pieces like Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Paris Johnson Jr., and so on and so forth. And while this offense may lack the star power of a team like the San Francisco 49ers or maybe the LA Rams or other teams like that, I do believe there are a lot of really good and solid players that can do a lot of good things for this offense. We won't discuss Kyler Murray quite yet because I'll save him and talk about him a little bit later. But behind Kyler Murray, you obviously have Desmond Ridder and Clayton Tune. I do believe that despite Desmond Ridder not being a great starting quarterback in the NFL, I do believe that he is actually a good backup in this league. So if for whatever reason Kyler Murray has to go down or maybe miss a couple games, then I do believe a guy like Desmond Ridder is definitely up for the job to be a decent serviceable starter for a few weeks. With that being said, though, this is not a team that can really afford an injury at the quarterback position. They're going to need a full healthy season from Kyler Murray, but if he is going to miss like a game or two, then I don't think they're absolutely screwed because they do have Desmond Ridder. In the running back room, there's a couple of talented running backs that I am a big fan of, starting off with James Conner, who is sort of the veteran in this running back room. I've been a big advocate for James Conner the past couple years after kind of switching my tune on him. A couple years back, I thought he was one of the more overrated running backs in the league, but the past couple years, he has been proving me wrong every single year. And whenever I watch this guy play, it just feels like he just consistently makes plays. He does the dirty work. He's a good pass blocker. He may not be the greatest with the ball in his hands like a Christian McCaffrey or like a Alvin Kamara type of guy, but man, he just does everything at a very high level and a very consistent level at that. Behind him, you have Emery Demercado and, of course, Trey Benson. Emery's a decent, serviceable backup, but Trey Benson's really the big-name guy who I'm extremely excited to see what he can turn into. Coming out of the draft, I had him as my RB2 just behind Jonathan Brooks, and I do believe that he was completely worth the pick for this team. Was the running back position necessarily the position they should have targeted when they got Trey Benson? Probably not. At the end of the day, there are a couple other positions I'd like to see them fill, but given the value of the pick and given the type of talent that I think Trey Benson has, I think he's going to be a serviceable guy this year and for the future going to be a really good running back for this team. Next up is the wide receiving core, which has had a really nice couple of additions this offseason. Of course, the big name guy here, Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that he can have a special type of season on the same level of like a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson. That's not to say he's going to go out there and give you 1,500 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. I wouldn't expect that for a rookie. But if he were to surpass 1,000 receiving yards and have like 8 or 9 touchdowns, I would not be surprised at all. He was, in my opinion, very clearly the receiver 1 in this year's draft, but I think that there is a lot of good, and I do believe there's a very good reason why every single analysis person out there would continue to tell you that Marvin Harrison Jr. was worth the hype coming out of college. He's just one of those special talents that is damn near good at everything. He can play on the inside, can play on the outside, has very sure hands, very good route runner, physical at the point of attack, and is very nuanced with his route running, which is very rare for a younger player like a Marvin Harrison Jr. To be honest with you, the only flaws to his game is that he doesn't have like breakaway speed like a Malik Neighbors or like a Xavier Worthy, but neither do guys like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or even CeeDee Lamb, so you're in good hands with Marvin Harrison Jr. Alongside him is Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch, two very underrated receivers, and I think they're going to pair quite nicely alongside Marvin Harrison. Michael Wilson in his rookie season put together 38 receptions for 565 yards and 3 touchdowns. And at certain points last year, it kind of felt like he was the receiver 1 for this team. Of course, that wasn't 100% the case because you had other guys like Greg Dortch and Hollywood Brown. But of course, Michael Wilson looked at points like he was the true guy. But truth be told, he should never be a receiver 1 for a competent franchise. This is a guy who is more settled in as that receiver 2/3. And now that there's going to be other guys pulling attention away from Michael Wilson, I expect him to have an even better second year in the NFL. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, you do have Greg Dortch, who I think will be the receiver 3 for this team next year. If Greg Dortch can take a step forward, then I think this is going to be a trio of wide receivers that is going to be around for this team for many years to come and be a very good, solid enough trio to get the job done. In the tight end room, there is Trey McBride McBride and Elijah Higgins and Tip Ryman. Tip Ryman will probably be more of your pass blocking, run blocking type of tight end, but he can go out there and run some routes and make some plays. I just wouldn't expect it as much as I would from a guy like Trey McBride. McBride obviously was sort of the standout player from last year. A lot of things went wrong for this team, but Trey McBride breaking out was one of the few good things that did happen. On the year, he had 81 receptions for 825 yards and 3 touchdowns, and as I mentioned, he was a really big bright spot for this offense. As he now enters another year in the NFL and another year with Kyler Murray, I do expect him to take a bigger step forward and likely hit around 1,000 receiving yards next year. I expect this Cardinals team with Kyler Murray fully healthy to be more of a pass-oriented offense rather than a really run-focused offense. Yes, they will run the ball a crap ton because James Conner, Trey Benson, Amari DeMarcado, they're going to run the ball. But when they do pass the ball, I expect guys like Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride to really be the 1-2 combination that's going to carry this offense in terms of the passing game. Again, an expectation for Trey McBride this year should be around 900 to 1,000 receiving yards and hopefully more than 3 touchdowns. And then last thing we'll talk about for this offense will be the offensive line. I'm not going to bore you guys and talk about each individual player like they're the second coming of Joe Elway, but I'll just kind of keep them brief and short. In total, I think this is a solid offensive line. I don't think it's a great offensive line, but I do think there is some potential to be pretty okay next year. Paris Johnson Jr. is obviously the guy they are hoping for to become one of the top players in the NFL. In his rookie season, there was a lot of ups and downs, which you would expect from a guy who was more of a developmental tackle coming out of college. Again, I do think there was a lot of bright points for Paris Johnson, but I want him to be a tad bit more consistent with his footwork, with his pass protection, with his run blocking, and I do think he'll get there. All in all, this is a big year for Paris Johnson. I don't expect him to be a top 10 tackle by the end of the year, but you do want to see him take the necessary steps forward to maybe being in the conversations at some point within the next couple years. Alongside at left guard, as of ESPN's depth chart, they do have Evan Brown, who is coming from Seattle, who primarily played a center position, but is looking like he's going to be playing the left guard spot. He's a really solid center slash guard slash interior offensive lineman, wherever you want to put him, but I wouldn't expect him to be a groundbreaker and a guy who's going to be on this team for many years, but I think he's a really solid and serviceable player. On those same lines, you can basically say the exact same things with guys like Froholt and Hernandez. They're solid, not necessarily cornerstone pieces of this franchise, but serviceable players who can get you from point A to point B for the next couple years. And then at right tackle, you brought in Jonah Williams. Of course, Jonah Williams was not worth the contract that he got, but this was a team that had the money to spend and needed to spend it, so they went out there and got another tackle to pair alongside Paris Johnson. I'm not the biggest fan of Jonah Williams, and as I said earlier, I don't think he was worth the contract he got, but I do feel as if it was maybe a necessary addition for this offense, so I do understand it. So all in all, this is an offense that has a bunch of established players, but also a little bit of room to grow with guys like Marvin Harrison and Trey Benson and Trey McBride. And assuming that Kyler Murray can stay healthy, I think this offense can easily be a top maybe 12 offense in the entire NFL. But with that all being said, let's now go into my second reason, which is going to be, just simply put, Kyler Murray. Now, unfortunately for Kyler Murray, he does get sort of a bad rap surrounding the NFL, but I kind of feel as if it's starting to shift a little bit, because after he went on his rant where he went over all of his accomplishments to the press, I do feel as if a lot of NFL fans started to show him a little bit more respect than what he was getting, because the narrative surrounding Kyler Murray is that he's not a winner, he can't take this team to the playoffs, he's not going to win this, he's not going to lead this team to division championships or the Super Bowl or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is that when Kyler Murray is healthy and when he's surrounded by a good team, he does put up some legitimately good numbers. For his career, he is currently sitting at 15,647 yards and 94 touchdowns with only 46 interceptions. And while I'm not going to dick ride him here and say he's been the best quarterback in the league, I do think when healthy with a good roster, he is within that top 10 conversation for quarterbacks. Now, am I going to sit up here and tell you guys that Kyler Murray, as of today, is in my top 10 quarterbacks? No, I'm not going to gaslight you. I'm not going to lie to you. But by the end of the season, if he has a good, productive season, I think he can easily find himself in those conversations. Last year and the past couple years have been a little bit injury-ridden and hasn't really been the best version of Kyler Murray. But I don't really think that we should blame him for a bad roster and not being able to stay healthy. Those are just things that are out of his control. But as he's heading into this 2024 season, he's going to be healthy. And I think, in my opinion, this is his best roster since maybe the DeAndre Hopkins teams. Again, I don't want to sit here and tell you guys that this offense is going to be fantastic, unstoppable, on the same level of the Niners and Rams and Cowboys and Dolphins and all them. But I think there is enough talent here, and I do think you have a genuine group of receivers and targets that I think Kyler Murray should have a ton of success. When talking about Kyler Murray, we also do have to consider that he's a running quarterback at times. He, for his career, has 2,448 yards running the ball and 26 touchdowns. So this is not a guy who's just going to be sitting in the pocket and being a hitting dummy behind this offensive line. No, he's going to run, he's going to make plays, and he's one of those dynamic quarterbacks that we don't mention, but we should mention when we talk about the guys like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. You got to put Kyler Murray's name in that same conversation and give him some level of respect. So as I mentioned, assuming that he can stay healthy, I think he has the weapons to be productive this upcoming season and has the potential to maybe be a top 10 quarterback next year. Again, I'm not going to sit up here and gaslight you and tell you that he will be top 10, but I think he has the ability to do so, and I think now he has the coaching staff and the roster to get him to that point. But the last thing and the last reason we'll talk about before I give a conclusion to this video, which will be year 2 of Gannon's defense. Now, I don't think it's an understatement to say that last year, this Cardinals team wasn't great, but despite the statistics not really looking that good, I actually think there was a lot of good play from this Cardinals team. I know they only won like 3 games last year, got embarrassed a couple weeks, but there was also a couple of games where they were in the game very late against teams they probably should not have been able to either beat or compete with. I still remember watching them destroy one of my favorite teams in the Dallas Cowboys, it just being like, how the hell is Zaven Collins destroying Dak Prescott every single play? It's because they have a good coach, and in my opinion, they have some talent on this defense. Now, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think this defensive line is very lackluster, but again, as I've mentioned throughout the video, there's some talent there. I do like Zaven Collins. I think Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols have good capabilities, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm in love with them. And surrounding them, you have guys like Mack Wilson, Kaiser White, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, Garrett Williams, Max Melton. Those are your back 7, your linebackers, your safeties, your corners, and I just kind of threw them at you, my apologies. So there is talent here. And I think that when you have a head coach like Jonathan Gannon, who maybe isn't the best head coach, but is a defensive-minded coach, you want to see him lead this maybe lackluster and lack of star talent defense into being somewhat decent next year. And now that this team should have a competent offense, I do expect this defense to take a slight step forward. If this defense is like 25th best in the league next year, which I think would be a slight improvement from last year. Don't quote me on that, but I think it would be. Then I don't really blame Jonathan Gannon if they're like not a great defense, because there's just not a lot of great talent on this defense. Like, in my opinion, I look at this defense and I really don't believe that there's any true superstars besides maybe Budda Baker, but honestly, he's not a superstar in this league anymore, at least in my opinion. So yeah, if this defense isn't great, then I don't think it's his fault. But I will say, I think that there is a good enough foundation for this defense to begin with, and within the next couple years, they're going to add even more talent to make this defense really good and serviceable. But this is not a video talking about the future. This is obviously a video that needs to hype up this Cardinals team to prove that they're underrated. So let's talk about this defense in a little bit more detail. There is talent here. Again, Zaven Collins, I think, can get to the pass, can get to the quarterback at a fairly decent level. Mack Wilson, who they brought in this year, I like him as a linebacker. Same with Kaiser White. He makes a bunch of boneheaded plays, but he can play too. I think your secondary is pretty solid. Sean Murphy-Bunting, Garrett Williams, Max Melton. There's a lot of potential there to be a decent cornerback trio. And then your safeties, I actually quite like a lot. I like Jalen Thompson. I like Budda Baker. I think they're good players. So with that and the Jonathan Gannon scheme, I think they can be somewhat serviceable this year. Again, as I mentioned earlier, assuming the offense can pick up some slack from what they did last year and be pretty decent, then I think this defense will be able to sit more and put together better game plans and maybe could help this team win some games. It is yet another year where they get to adjust to the system of Jonathan Gannon and get used to the personnel and become a master of his craft. If this defense can take a sizable step forward, I don't really see how this Cardinals team can't take a step forward. But with that all being said, let's kind of put a bow on the end of this present for you guys. Do I think this Cardinals team is going to make the playoffs? Probably no way. While I like Kyler Murray, I like Jonathan Gannon, and I like a lot of players in this team, it's just really hard to compete with the likes of the Lions, the Packers, the Niners, the Rams, or even the Seahawks, and I'd even mention the Cowboys or Eagles. So realistically speaking, I don't think they're going to be quite yet playoff contenders per se, but maybe next year or maybe the year after that, they'll be in that contention for those spots. Because for me, I think it's about building a solid foundation and taking the proper steps to actually getting to that point. And after looking at their schedule, it's a really tough schedule, but there are some winnable games in between the tough games, and maybe you'll win a couple tough games here and there. So last year, as I said way earlier in the video, you won like 3 games last year. I expect this team to win maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 if everything goes well. I have a lot of faith in Kyler. I have a lot of faith in a lot of these players. Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, James Conner, some pieces on the defense. You have to have faith in those guys because those are your guys who should be helping this team win games. And as this team continues to take steps forward, they're going to get more and more and more competitive. I think this team will be maybe a little bit worse to start the year off, but by the end of the year, they'll actually be pretty darn good. So again, Likely no playoffs, but they'll win like 6, 7, 8 games next year. But if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. And I know I need to get a Cardinals hat, but I love you guys. Peace.